Ladies and gentlemen, Roster Watch Nation, welcome back to the epic Roster Watch Podcast, brought to you by RosterWatch.com. My name is Alex Dunlap, and our guest today needs absolutely no introduction. He is the talented Mr. Roto. He is Matthew Berry of ESPN, ESPN.com, the ESPN Fantasy Podcast. You know him, you love him. Berry, what the hell's going on, brother?
Not much. I'll get all the plugs in for you because I'm a company man. Fantasy show on ESPN Plus, Fantasy Focus podcast, Monday through Friday, 5 days a week. And we also stream it live where you can watch us do it 10 a.m. Eastern on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, ESPN app, the ESPN Fantasy app. Of course, my column Love Hate out on ESPN.com right now. Sign up to play for free in the ESPN Fantasy app, 100%. And yeah, I think that's about it.
Well, what about RotoPass? We got to pitch RotoPass.
Let's disclose that.
Okay.
I'm a big fan, Alex, of your work, of Byron's work, of RosterWatch.com in general. It's part of the RotoPass package. So what I've done there is basically I went to all the sites I use, all the sites that I think do the best job in the industry. And I mean no disrespect because there's a lot of people out there that do good work. But I wanted to handpick 6 sites that I feel like not only are great in and of themselves, but complement each other in terms of what they do. So in addition to all the great stuff you guys do here at RosterWatch.com, you've got footballguys.com, you got RotoViz, you got RotoWire, you got a full year of ESPN Plus, so you can watch my show, read all of Mike Clay's stuff, some of our DFS stuff. And then we just added Sharp Football Analysis. Warren Sharp, you've seen him on Fox, on ESPN, on Bleacher Report, the Wall Street Journal, the Ringer. A lot of NFL teams use his stuff, his data and analytics. He's got a fantasy football package that he does with Rich Rebar at Lord Reeves, if you're on Twitter. And so their fantasy football package is part of the pass as well. So 6 great sites, 1 low price, Alex, and anyone that uses the promo code ROSTER, all caps, ROSTER, gets 10% off. Get better than that.
The inside from Sharp, and you mentioned Lord Reeves, man, but he's a goat, dude. He's an awesome analyst. So of course you can go to rotopass.com, use promo code ROSTER, all uppercase, and then you get the content all season long from not just Roster Watch, but also like Matthew mentioned, ESPN Plus, Football Guys, RotoWire, RotoViz, and Sharp Football Analysis. So that is rotopass.com. All right, Matthew, the people want to hear your picks. They want to hear you. So you have the love-hate column out. I gave it a look yesterday. Great work as always, brother.
Thank you.
My first question for you, I noticed that, it doesn't seem like you're a Miles Sanders guy this year at his current ADP, but what do we make of it what do we make of his, does it change anything now that he's week to week with a lower body injury?
Just doesn't help. I mean, look, I don't know that it's necessarily injury prone, but it's not ideal, right? I mean, we have limited preseason. We're in an unprecedented era, Alex. And so my sort of argument, my feeling about this entire year, very simply, is that there's so much that's unknown about fantasy football in general. And now you're doing it in a year with COVID-19, where there's no preseason games, where there's literally 14 padded practices. And so for me, I want players that are in similar situations. I want as much proven as I can. And so with Miles Sanders, now he's going to miss some practice time, right? Miles Sanders has a 5-game sample as an elite running back. And I'm not saying he's not talented. He's talented. I'm not saying he's not going to have a good year. He's going to have a good year. But he's being drafted as a top 7 running back. He's being drafted as a top 7 running back off of a 5-game sample. He was great for 5 games last year when the Eagles had nobody. They had Zach Ertz, who was limping around on one leg. They had former San Antonio commander of the AAF, Greg Ward, as their number 1 wide receiver.
That's weird.
They had 5'8" practice squad player Boston Scott playing significant snaps. When I tell you they had nobody, they had nobody. So obviously Miles Sanders got a tremendous workload. Okay. And I'm not saying that he's not going to lead the team in carries, because he will. I'm not saying he's not the number 1 running back in the Eagles, because obviously he is, and there's not a lot there. But now with, they're going to get Alshon Jeffrey back at some point. Ertz and Goddard both healthy at the same point. Jalen Reagor, they spent an early round draft pick on as well. Deshaun Jackson drawing rave reviews in camp. We'll see. Hopefully he can stay healthy for the year. But all of a sudden, there's a lot more weapons in Philadelphia than just Miles Sanders. And the stat that I gave in my love-hate column about Miles Sanders was really a Doug Peterson stat, right? And I know people are arguing, oh, well, he's never had a guy like Miles Sanders. Like, okay. But Doug Peterson, former NFL quarterback, Doug Peterson, wants to run a pass-first offense. He does. Right. And he has been the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles for 4 seasons. 64 games over 4 seasons. Only 9 times, Alex, 9 times in those 64 games has a single running back gotten more than 20 touches in a game.
Yep.
9 and 64. And again, you're like, well, he's never had a guy like Miles Sanders. That was the same argument people used about O.J. Howard last year. Bruce Arians doesn't use his tight end in his offense. Well, he's never had a guy like O.J. Howard. How'd that work out? I just, when you're drafting Miles Sanders as running back 7, you're basically drafting him at his highest level ADP. The way you win fantasy football isn't by buying at the high. The way you win fantasy football is getting, somebody like Lamar Jackson is QB 13 and he turns into QB 1 by a wide margin. Getting Austin Eckler in the middle rounds and he turns out to be a top 10 running back. You're paying at running back 7 is, I think, the ceiling for Miles Sanders this year. There's no room for profit. I have him as an RB2, not as an RB1 this year. So we'll see how that plays out.
And I think it's fair. And, some people on Twitter will call you out, of course, for anything, but people will call us out for saying, for just pointing out that like Peterson has been, dude, I can remember him going into press conferences and saying stuff like, we need to commit more to like Ryan Matthews. It's been going on that long. So yeah, I love Miles Sanders as a player. And it brings up an interesting point. Now, on top of all this, we have the lower body injury to worry about. If we could just stay on running backs, I saw you in your love-hate. You love Josh Jacobs. We love Josh Jacobs, underrated offensive line this year. And at the combine, wherever we get to see it every year, Matthew, Mike Mayock told us that this year was going to be phase 2 in the evolution of Josh Jacobs. My question to you is, how much can we really take away from the fact that his goal is to catch 60 balls this season? This is a time of year when guys are, guys have high hopes. I mean, what do you think?
I don't know how much that I buy that. But again, what does fantasy football success come from? It comes from 2 things. It comes from talent and opportunity. Okay. And so Josh Jacobs, we agree on the talent.
Oh, yeah.
And it comes from opportunity. Again, like I know that the Miles Sanders truthers are like, well, he doesn't have any competition. Like, I get that you guys don't like Corey Clement or Boston Scott, and I'm not saying those guys are world beaters. But again, Doug Peterson has rolled out, to your point, Ryan Matthews and Jay Ajayi. Like, they're not scared. Miles Sanders was such an all-world talent, right? And people, like better numbers than Saquon at Penn State, right? You heard all that baloney.
Sure.
Guy couldn't beat out Jordan Howard last year. When Jordan Howard was healthy with the Eagles, Miles Sanders averaged 11 touches a game. Again, I'm saying Miles Sanders is a good player, but like Josh Jacobs, I have Josh Jacobs ranked higher because I think my belief is that there's literally no one on the Raiders. DeAndre Washington, everyone is like the guy that Phil done so well from last year, now in Kansas City. Like it's Jalen Richard, like Josh Jacobs is going to get as much as he can handle, and any passing game improvement from him is going to be a positive. The other thing is and sometimes, and I've never met Miles Sanders, and I don't want to make this an anti-Miles Sanders podcast because I'm as a top 15 running back. And it's a top 7 running back. I still like Sanders quite a bit. I just don't like him as much as the consensus. I've met Josh Jacobs a few times. I've spent hours with him. Like I interviewed him for an hour one time. And I don't know how many people that are listening to this know Josh Jacobs' story.
Oh, I was there in the room. He's an incredible kid. But yeah, I mean, tell him for sure.
So this is a kid that like was sleeping in his dad's station wagon. Like, his dad was bouncing around from job to job and he loves his father. That's no disrespect to the father. Father's doing what he could to provide for his family. But like they would sleep in motels and hotels, and they're homeless for a while, and they're sleeping in their station wagon or the car. And he's playing in some small school in Oklahoma, and he had to put his highlights on Twitter and social media just to get any kind of attention. He played wildcat quarterback in Oklahoma, like doing all these kind of things. I will tell you, as somebody who has spent a decent amount of time, he's an easy kid to root for. I just think he's a phenomenal human being. Yep. And listen, that doesn't necessarily there are some really terrible human beings that are amazing football players. And there's some really awesome human beings that aren't that great. But I'm just going to tell you, in terms of in a year in which there's so much unknown, and you want to sort of, push your chips on somebody, Josh Jacobs is a kid that, it's easy to see why the Raiders organization thinks so highly of him.
Yeah, and I'll also say, right out of the gate too, in week one, he's going to face Carolina, which is one of the most beautiful matchups that we've identified. Then you always think you draft these teams, and like you look at week one, you're like, man, what why wasn't I interested in this guy? Yeah, I would have loved getting him in this matchup. You got to get off to a fast start. Okay, so staying on running backs before we kind of get to some wide receivers, and I know you're super busy, so we'll get you out of here. But what about Clyde Edwards-Helaire? Are we drafting him at the all right, so what do you think? Okay.
All in. So, I mean, I'm talking a little bit out of both sides of my mouth. Like, and I'll own that. I'll own that, which is where I'm saying, hey, my anti-Sanders argument is, again, like, I want similar, and I want, so Josh Jacobs, same system, right? Everything like that. No risk there. But obviously, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, there's risk. He's a rookie running back. And if you want him, you're going to have to draft him middle of the first round, if not earlier. Like, there's not a league in America where he's getting out of the first round now that Damian Williams has decided to opt out of the 2020 season. So I guess for me, what I'm banking on here is two things. Again, as we sort of talk about, it's talent and opportunity. And I'll add a third thing here. So the talent, I think, is obvious, right? CEH is, I believe, the only player in SEC history with over 1,000 rushing yards and over 50 receptions in the same season. He just sort of pops off the tape. Even before he landed in Kansas City, I was asked, and I had him as my number one running back come out of college. You can go back and look at my tweets. So this isn't like just some sort of bandwagon thing. Like, that was the guy that I had coming into the NFL draft, is like, this is we'll see where everyone lands, but my number one just, on talent guy is him.
That was a hot take back then.
It was.
That was a hot take.
It was. Everyone talking up Jonathan Taylor. I get it. And I know there are a lot of people that like Swift. And yeah, I had CEH as number one. But then you go to Andy Reid. And literally, Alex, when I was doing instant reaction videos for ESPN on draft night, and my reaction video, if you can go back and watch this, about CEH was, "Be still my beating heart. Are you kidding me?" CEH in an Andy Reid offense. Right. Very excited about that. Like, he's a perfect fit for what they like to do. Andy Reid compared him favorably. Said, we think he's actually better than Brian Westbrook. Remember, Brian Westbrook had 7 different years as the number one running back. 7 different years as a top 7 running back under Andy Reid, including 2 years as the number one running back in fantasy. Over the last 15 years, which is a pretty good sample size, the number one running back in an Andy Reid offense has averaged 18 fantasy points per game, which last year would have been running back 8, just ahead of Alvin Kamara. But by the way, he hasn't had Patrick Mahomes all 15 years. I think this is an offense that could explode. They have everyone back this year. And again, you're in a year in which no preseason games, not that many padded practices. Like, so give me the teams that are returning as many starters in the same offensive system, which is what the Chiefs are doing. And with Damian Williams, like, talent, and he's going to have massive opportunity in that Chiefs backfield. We know about the talent, and I'm banking on Andy Reid's offense. Think about some of the guys that Andy Reid has made relevant. Coral Buckhalter, Sharkhandrick West.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Spencer Ware. Right?
Spencer Ware. Thank you very much. Like, CEH, I think, is a special player, and I think he is worth the hype.
Yeah, and one other thing I'll just toss in, like, if you're worried about a similar player, maybe in DeAndre Washington being a little bit redundant, I found it interesting that, for one, the beat reporters are saying that Clyde Edwards-Helaire is in there doing everything he needs to do from the pass protection standpoint. Like, that is what we really needed to hear. And also that it's Darrell Williams coming in with the 2s. DeAndre Washington doesn't come in until the 3s. It's almost like he's the backup as opposed to like a 1B to a 1A, which should mean a lot for his. If
you're in a deep draft, if you're in a deep draft, Alex, you're in a best ball draft. Darrell Williams is really interesting because so you think about who's on that team in that running back room. So you got Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Never played an NFL snap, trying to learn Andy Reid's offense. DeAndre Washington played college ball at Texas Tech with Mahomes. Okay, so points for that, but also was on the Raiders last year, also trying to learn the system. You know who was there last year? Who knows all the pass protection? Darrell Williams.
Yeah.
Who, by the way, Darrell Williams, very small sample size, but Darrell Williams in games in which he got double-digit carries last year, averaged over 15 fantasy points per game. It was like 3 games, so it's a very small sample size. But Darrell, and then they got Darwin Thompson, who I know everyone was in love with last year, but, you know, Darwin Thompson, you know, smaller guy, not going to be the between the tackles guy for Andy Reid. The most important thing Andy Reid and the Chiefs have to do this year is protect the co-owner of the Kansas City Royals. They've got a $500 million.
Okay, right. Yeah. I forgot about that.
$1 billion quarterback.
Yeah.
Nothing is more important than protecting that kid. So if CEH isn't in there, I think it's going to be Darrell Williams. So anyway, I just think that's an interesting name for the, you know, way late in your draft.
It is, and it like nobody's talking about it. So here you have, you heard it again. Heard it here first. All right, so let's talk about some wide receivers and quarterbacks before your time's up. How about these 2 guys, man? They're both nuclear weapons. Hollywood Brown, Will Fuller. I love both those guys as long as they're not my wide receiver 1. I think having them as a wide receiver 2, or maybe, I mean, golly, you know, if you could get one of those guys as your wide receiver 3, how great I would personally feel about my wide receiver position. Do you like Hollywood Brown and Will Fuller this year? And if you had to choose between one or the other, which one are you more interested in? Clearly, they both have they definitely both have some feathers in their cap that you could point to.
1,000%. So both guys made so Marquise Brown, Hollywood Brown actually made my love list. And then Will Fuller made my others receiving votes. So if you're asking me to choose between the 2, I have Marquise Brown ranked higher.
Okay.
I thought so. Graham, I think our mutual friend Graham Barfield tweeted this out the other day, and I thought this was a great point, which is like everyone's looking for the next Tyreek Hill. Guys, it's Marquise Brown. Don't stop looking.
Right.
Like my point that I made about Marquise Brown, injured coming into his rookie season, learning a new system with an inexperienced quarterback, still caught 66% of his targets. That was top 20 in the NFL. And now, so we know about the talent. And now there's the opportunity as well. People forget. Everyone talks about Lamar Jackson, the rushing. People forget Lamar Jackson threw the most touchdown passes in the NFL. Marquise Brown is the number 1 wide receiver on the number 1 offense in the NFL. You know, I mean, maybe the Chiefs, you want to put the Chiefs ahead there, but whatever. He's the number 1 wide receiver for Lamar Jackson, for one of the best and most explosive offenses in the NFL. Now coming to his second year, now fully healthy, and he's competing for targets with Mark Andrews and like Miles Boykin, Willie Snead, like
we don't
Devin
know
Duvernay,
yet.
like I mean, like
Devin Duvernay, yeah.
Duvernay, did I pronounce his name wrong? I do actually like Duvernay, but I mean Marquise Brown, and he's going way late. Hang on for a second, I'm going to look up exactly where he's going on ESPN these days. Now he is going. Let's see.
You got to remember everything he did last year too with that catch percentage. He did it like 155 pounds, which is just unbelievable, unbelievable to me with the screw in his foot.
He's going as wide receiver 31 on ESPN, the 9th round. Now again, ESPN 10-team leagues, we only make you start 2 wide receivers, so it's a shallower league than maybe some of your listeners are used to. But
it's still too late. It's too late.
Like he's going as a wide receiver 4. I have him significantly higher than that. But so, yeah, love Marquise Brown. Love the call by you, Alex. Totally agree. All in on him. You know, I think he potentially could have a massive year. And with Will Fuller, the question has never been talent. It's always been about health. But obviously, Will Fuller, Will Fuller obviously has a big opportunity ahead of him now with DeAndre Hopkins in Arizona. just to give you a quick little stat here on Will Fuller, I will let you know that he's got the last 16 games, NFL season, last 16 games that Will Fuller has played with at least 7 targets. And it's happened over multiple years. I mean, fairness, right? But still, Deshaun Watson's been the quarterback the whole time. Last 16 games in which he's had at least 7 targets, Will Fuller has put up this line: 87 receptions, 1,192 receiving yards, 8 touchdowns, 259.9 fantasy points, would have been wide receiver 7 last year.
Yeah.
He's going as wide receiver 36 on ESPN. Yeah. And I'm not saying he finishes as a top 7 fantasy wide receiver, but we know what that potential is. And to your point, if you don't have to go into the season with him as your first or second, and you can just play him in the games in which he's healthy, there's 150 targets up for grabs with DeAndre Hopkins moving on to Arizona. And I know they've got Cooks and Cobb there, but those are guys that have struggled with injuries themselves. And I don't know. Yeah.
And there's no tight end to consequence. And Will Fuller's put on weight, and Deshaun Watson saying, look out, this is his year. I mean, we don't have, we don't have as many camps to go to. Sometimes you got to listen to the players about what's going on. I'd also mention about Marquise Brown. If you go to rotopass.com and get a subscription over there, you can use promo code ROSTER, all uppercase letters for the discount. Curtis Patrick from RotoViz has a very intriguing article about where he just lays out the fact that it's an absolute lock that Marquise Brown's gonna break out this year. So you can find some good content over there with your RotoPass membership. Again, promo code ROSTER. Okay, what about just a couple more of the? How about this? Where are you on Odell Beckham? I mean, it's like people are. I don't know if people are all over the map or people are just kind of like. I haven't heard much talk about Odell Beckham this year. People seem pretty hyped up about DJ Moore. Those guys are going pretty close in ADP. Do you lean one way or the other, or just have any real takes on either one of those guys for 2020?
I'm a little nervous about DJ Moore just because I'm a little nervous about DJ Moore. I have Beckham higher than DJ Moore, so I have Beckham at 11. I have DJ Moore at 13. Just to be clear on my rankings for full PPR leagues. Okay. Again, you have to nitpick at this level. Yep. So you think about range of outcomes. Which one of these guys has a better chance to finish the year as the number 1 wide receiver in football? It's Beckham. Beckham could. I mean, Beckham's got that ability, right? Yeah. Which one of these guys has a better chance of jumping into the top 3, into the top 5? Again, sort of, I get it. Listen, it's a newer offense, obviously. Kevin Stefanski coming into Cleveland, but at least he's playing with the same quarterback. He's got Landry. It's mostly the same personnel around him as well. He will get positive touchdown regression this year. Like he absolutely just got really unlucky with scoring last year, and we've seen it. We know how talented he is as a player. DJ Moore, new quarterback, new system, more competition for targets. They added Robbie Anderson as well. They expect Ian Thomas to have a nice role here. Obviously got Curtis Samuel and CMC as well. And so I'm just a little bit nervous about DJ Moore's touchdown equity. And, does he get the same kind of, target share this year with Teddy Bridgewater, with the new coaching staff that he did last year under Scott Turner and Ron Rivera? Again, I'm at 13. I have Beckham at 11. You have to nitpick here. But I just think there's more upside with Beckham than there is with DJ Moore. And the other thing is that wide receiver this year, Alex, as I'm sure you guys have talked about, is so insanely deep. So insanely deep. When you look at guys going in their 40s, you're like, that's actually a pretty good guy.
Right.
So insanely deep that I would rather be more risky with my wide receivers. DJ Moore might have a higher floor because, Beckham's dealt with his injuries, but Beckham's got the higher upside. And I'd rather shoot for the moon and swing for the fences with a guy like Beckham because if it doesn't work out, I feel I'll be able to replace him easier than go for floor. There are other positions where I'm more interested in floor, but with wide receiver specifically this year, I want upside.
Odell Beckham, I don't know if it was 2015 or 2016. He would, like you said, like we've seen, he didn't finish the wide receiver one, but had he played 16 full games and gotten like 11 points in his 16th game, he would have finished wide receiver one. Yep. He only played 15 games that year. I think it was 2015 or 2016. So we've seen it. We've seen it. Okay, just one more quickly here at the wide receiver position before I just have a couple of just overall ADP questions. What about CeeDee Lamb versus Henry Ruggs? They're two rookies that are very close in ADP in very different situations. CeeDee Lamb, of course, he's got Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup to deal with, but probably not too much outside of those guys. Whereas Henry Ruggs was seemingly drafted to be the number one there for the Raiders. How long he takes to where he's finally there, do you have any insight? What do you think? Are you interested in either one for redraft? Are they mostly dynasty for you? And
I think they're more dynasty
your general thoughts
than they are for redraft. Again, you've got rookies coming in, no preseason, but if I had to pick one, I suppose give me CeeDee Lamb, just in that. Give me Dak over Derek Carr. Give me the Cowboys offense over the Raiders. Mm-hmm. And to your point about sort of like target tree, he's competing with Cooper. He's competing with Gallup. He's competing with Blake Jarwin, basically. In terms of, you've got Zeke too. Zeke out of the backfield. Okay, fine. But both Cooper and Gallup have dealt with injuries. Meanwhile, Ruggs, who's already been injured this preseason, I don't know that there's as much of a pecking order, right? So they've got Darren Waller, they've got Hunter Renfrow, they've got Bryan Edwards, who is, turning a lot of heads in camp so far this year. They've got Tyrell Williams. People forget they signed Tyrell Williams to a big deal, and he's still there. So I weirdly think when we look back on it, barring injury to anyone, that Ruggs may have more fantasy points, more total fantasy points than CeeDee Lamb at the end of the year. Uh-huh. But in terms of who's got the chance to break out and potentially, be a starter for you over the second half of the year, I prefer Lamb to Ruggs. I
think so too. Yeah.
Again, Derek Carr, it's just Dak and the Cowboys offense significantly over Carr and the Raiders for me.
Ruggs will be one of these guys where it's hard to pinpoint the weeks that you start him. Whereas maybe CeeDee Lamb down the stretch could be a guy that develops into something where you could at least have a good PPR floor. All right, so
point, Alex, to that point. Last year, in the weeks in which Gallup, Cooper, and Randall Cobb were healthy, which they all played a qualifying number of snaps. I want to say at least 30 snaps. This is off the top of my head, so I might be getting the stat wrong. But the point is basically the same. Is in those weeks, on a points per game basis, Cooper, Gallup, and Cobb were all top 30 fantasy wide receivers. That offense, I think, is explosive enough to support 3 fantasy relevant wide receivers. Like Cobb had a couple 100-yard games in there.
Yeah. And if they all are, then that means you want Dak, right?
I have Dak as my QB3. Dak was on my love list this year. Dak is currently going as QB6 on ESPN. I don't get it. To me, Dak is the clear-cut QB3 after Jackson and Mahomes, and I don't think it's close. I think his production may be somewhat close to, we'll see what Kyler does and, Wilson and Watson, obviously, but I don't think there's a debate as to who should be number 3.
Well, we have 3 weeks from the day that we record this until kickoff. Is that the stupidest? Is that the stupidest ADP out there at this point in time? Dak Prescott, or is there a stupider one that you could think of?
A stupider ADP. Some of the guys we've already mentioned. A couple of the running backs. Chris Carson. Chris Carson's overall ADP. Let me see where it is.
You can get him in the third round over and over. Yeah.
Chris Carson is going as number 32 overall, and that's up from where he's been. But so he's going basically, middle of the 4th round. I'm at 23. I'm at 23 overall. Chris Carson, here's the entire list, Alex. Here's the entire list of running backs with at least 1,100 rushing yards and 9 total touchdowns each of the last 2 years. Here's the list. Ezekiel Elliott, Chris Carson. That's the list.
Is that true?
Yeah.
That's wild. That's a wild stat. No, I'm sure it is. That's crazy.
At least 1,100 rushing yards and 9 total touchdowns. Ezekiel Elliott, Chris Carson. Everyone wants to say Chris Carson gets hurt. And you're like, well, Okay, but last 2 years, Chris Carson has played 29 games, which is the same as Alvin Kamara, the same as Saquon Barkley, right? I mean, it's more than Dalvin Cook. We don't have any problem drafting those guys in the top 5. Then you're like, well, what about the fumbles? And you're like, yeah, he had a fumbling issue last year, and he's lucky because he plays for the perfect coach. Because
Pete Carroll says he doesn't care.
He says he doesn't care. Get back out there.
Yeah, that's wild, man. Yeah,
talent plus opportunity. Who's he competing with for touches? I was gonna say Seattle's gonna be one of the best offenses in the NFL, and they're gonna be one of the run heaviest offenses in the NFL. And who's he competing for with touches? Rashad Penny, who's going to start the season on the physically unable to perform list, and we're now year 3 into, this is the year Penny takes over Chris Carson? I don't think so. Carlos Hyde is on his 6th NFL team in 4 years, and despite rushing for 1,000 yards for the Texans were willing to get rid of DeAndre Hopkins to bring in David Johnson. That's how happy they were with cheap Carlos Hyde. Stop it. Or DJ Dallas, who, when Pete Carroll went up to the press conference after the NFL draft and he got to DJ Dallas, the first thing out of Pete Carroll's mouth was, I know the guys are really excited to see him on special teams.
It's never the best, man.
We suddenly, how we're worried about Travis Homer? Like, come on, stop it. It's Chris Carson's job. Chris Carson is going to be the guy. I mean, Chris Carson was 5th in carries per game last year. I mean, he's going to get tons of usage on one of the best offenses in the NFL. And again, he's going in the 4th round.